Chapter 4155. Master, based on our current situation, I'm afraid that we're no match for them, Weisher reminded her. If their opponents had been few in number, they might have been able to put up a fight. However, there were simply too many opponents now. Furthermore, Qian Feilong and Mu Zhe were both Starlight Realm cultivators. It was almost impossible for them to defeat them. Even though Bailey Hongzhuang's hatred for Qian Feilong has reached its peak, she did not lose her rationality because of this. Under these circumstances, the only thing she could do was to escape. 10 years was not too late for a gentleman to take revenge. As long as she could escape today, it would not be too late for her to exact her revenge one by one. Anyway, these fellows were all in the Crimson Moon sect. When the time comes, it would be very convenient for her to find them. Let's escape first. Once we've put some distance between us and them, we'll hide in the Chaos Ring. I believe that they won't be able to find us. Her pitch-black and deep eyes flickered with a quick-witted light. This was the safest way to escape. The Chaos Ring could be said to be a great tool for escaping. However, there must be enough distance between both parties. Otherwise, if the Chaos Ring were to fall into the hands of others, the consequences would be unthinkable. Upon hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the three beasts expressed their agreement. This was indeed the best way to escape. In the blink of an eye, when Qian Feilong and the others had begun to make their move, Bailey Hongzhuang had immediately run forward. Li Boyo and the others had also guessed that Bailey Hongzhuang would choose to escape. Their reaction speed was extremely fast, and they hurriedly chased after her. Bailey Hongzhuang unleashed her shape-shifting technique. She did not hesitate to circulate all her energy and raised her speed to the maximum. However, as she was escaping, she realized that Mu Zhe and the others were not slow either. They were following closely behind her, so closely that she could not disappear from the sight of the Crimson Moon sect cultivators. Master, these fellows are very fast as well. Xiao Bai's expression was a little ugly. Her master's speed had always been fast. She never thought that she would not be able to shake them off this time. Bailey Hongzhuang's face darkened. I almost forgot that the Crimson Moon sect's movement techniques are very famous. Therefore, the cultivators of the Crimson Moon sect are very good at speed. She had heard this from Ren Ziheng in the past. However, at that time, she did not have much contact with the cultivators of the Crimson Moon sect. Therefore, she did not take this matter to heart. It was only at this moment that she remembered everything. Compared to Bailey Hongzhuang's helplessness, Qian Feilong and the others also felt very depressed. This Bailey Hongzhuang's cultivation is lower than the two of us. How can she be so fast? This kind of movement martial skill seems to be even more powerful than what we have. Mu Zhe nodded slightly. This Bailey Hongzhuang is not an ordinary person. Not only is she extremely skilled in medicine, her strength is also not bad. Penglai Palace treats her like a treasure, so since we have decided to attack her, we must kill her. Otherwise, if she leaves alive, we will be in trouble in the future. If he had not made a promise to Li Boyo, he would not have wanted to offend Bailey Hongzhuang. When it comes to dealing with this kind of fellow, it must be dealt with cleanly. Otherwise, she would be like a hornet's nest and would definitely be asking for trouble. Chapter 4156. Seeing Qian Feilong's confidence, Mu Zhe was surprised. Although he felt that they could do this without any problems, Qian Feilong seemed to be implying something. Didn't you notice which direction Bailey Hongzhuang is escaping in? Qian Feilong smiled faintly. Hearing Qian Feilong's words, Mu Zhe couldn't help but look ahead. Suddenly, a trace of surprise appeared in his eyes. That's right. Qian Feilong nodded. That's the place. Bailey Hongzhuang is digging her own grave this time. It seems that we don't have to worry anymore. Mu Zhe chuckled. He could finally put down the rock in his heart. As long as he could solve this problem today, he would have nothing to worry about. As Bailey Hongzhuang moved forward, she suddenly realized that the sky in front of her was getting darker and darker. Her expression became complicated. Logically speaking, it shouldn't be like this at this time. What's going on? Although she was puzzled, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't have the time to think about it. She was forced to continue moving forward. Once she changed direction, the others would catch up with her. However, as Bailey Hongzhuang got closer, she realized where she was. In her line of sight, skeletons were dancing wildly. Isn't it daytime now? Why are there skeletons here? Xiao Hei's expression turned ugly. They were already in a terrible situation. Now that there were skeletons blocking their way, they couldn't pass at all. It was terrible. I didn't think that we would come here. Bai Shi immediately understood everything. Ao Lingxiao had said this when he introduced the entrance to the upper realm. Regardless of day or night, there were skeletons everywhere. Therefore, only cultivators of the Starlight Realm and above could pass through here to reach the entrance to the upper realm. Previously, Bai Shi was still curious. However, now that he saw it, he completely understood. The number of skeletons here was too shocking. It was much more terrifying than what they had seen before. At this moment, he also knew why some cultivators who had reached the Starlight Realm had yet to enter the upper realm. Based on the current situation, if one's battle prowess wasn't strong enough and was only at the level of Astral Radiance Stage 1, it wouldn't be easy for them to pass through this place. Qian Feilong and the others quickly caught up. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's ugly expression, they all smiled. Bailey Hongzhuang, you have no way out now. Why don't you just kill yourself and save us the trouble? Qian Feilong chuckled. Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze was cold and merciless. If you want to kill me, you have to pay the price. Come to think of it, you guys didn't gain much of an advantage when you attacked Yingying and the others. You had so many people before, but now you've lost half of your people. Your losses are even greater than ours. As Bailey Hongzhuang spoke, the expressions of the cultivators from the Crimson Moon sect instantly turned ugly. They could not help but recall the time when they were dealing with Xiren and the others. Indeed, none of these guys were easy to deal with. It clearly looked like a sure-win situation, but they still had to pay a heavy price. Now that he thought about it, he felt a wave of displeasure in his heart. Chapter 4157. Even though Mu Zhe and the others had covered it up very quickly, Bailey Hongzhuang had not overlooked this point, and had keenly noticed it. Didn't they die by our hands in the end? Qian Feilong laughed icily. I admit that your friends have great potential. Unfortunately, they had offended us, and could only lose their little lives in the end. Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze slowly darkened, but her expression became even more determined. Since things have come to this, let's fight if you want. A raging desire to fight burned in her eyes. Now that there was no way to retreat, she would fight with all her might. Even though she could already foresee the final outcome, as long as she could make the other party pay a price, that would be good enough. The three spiritual beasts stayed by Bailey Hongzhuang's side. They would live and die with their master. Even if they were to all die here today, they would make sure that a few of the Crimson Moon sect's members were left alive. Master, we will fight with you until the end. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang's lips slowly curled into a smile. However, there was a sense of sadness in her smile. All right. In the next moment, the energy within Bailey Hongzhuang's body began to surge, and the aura of a level 2-star master was completely revealed. Faced with Bailey Hongzhuang's aura, Qian Feilong and the others were very calm. They had long known about Bailey Hongzhuang's cultivation level. However, she was only at the level 2-star master. This was not a threat to them at all. Xiao Hei and Xiao Bai also enlarged their bodies and stood next to Bailey Hongzhuang. Their auras completely exploded. Purple Realm 9th level. Bai Shi was not slow either. Similarly, his Purple Realm 9th level aura exploded as well. When Qian Feilong and the others saw that Bailey Hongzhuang had 3 contracted spiritual beasts, they could not help but stare blankly for a moment. Their brains could not react in time. This situation was beyond their common sense, but they didn't dwell on it too much. Although they didn't know how Bailey Hongzhuang did it, it was enough to know that she would soon die in their hands. Bailey Hongzhuang, this little bit of strength is not enough. Mu Zhe slowly said, his voice full of ridicule. He could tell that Bailey Hongzhuang was planning to fight them to the death. But with this little bit of strength, she was no threat to them. Come to think of it, a dying person wanting to throw away some dignity at the last moment. But not having enough strength, this was also a very depressing matter. However, Bailey Hongzhuang did not care about what he said. A wave of blood qi quietly spread out, and the blood chi field instantly exploded. Following the release of the blood chi field, Qian Feilong and the rest were shocked to discover that Bailey Hongzhuang's aura had directly risen from level 2 to level 4. Everyone couldn't help but light up. Their eyes flashed with a thick sense of astonishment. If Bailey Hongzhuang's level 2 star master strength was not enough to affect them, but this level 4 star master strength was not simple. At least, they couldn't completely ignore it. How did her strength increase so much? Qian Feilong was a little dumbfounded. This was really beyond his expectations. Looks like the reason why Mo Yunjue and the rest were able to kill them is because of this. Mu Ze lowered his voice and said slowly. Chapter 4158. It was only at this moment that Mu Ze finally understood. No wonder Mo Yunjue and the rest were able to kill their teammates despite having so few people. It turned out that they had underestimated Mo Yunjue and the rest's abilities. Previously, when they were facing Skeleton, these fellows had actually been hiding their abilities. It was truly terrifying. Thinking of this, he suddenly felt his scalp tingle. It seemed that he should not have provoked such a group of trouble. Mo Yunjue and the rest had successfully left. They must have already reached Penglai Palace, and the people in Penglai Palace probably already knew about this matter. If Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching did not return, everyone would know that Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching had died in their hands. Based on the friendship shown by Mo Yunjue and the rest, Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest had died in their hands. They would definitely not take this lying down. When the time came, they would definitely come looking for them for revenge. However, when facing such talented cultivators, they would inevitably encounter trouble in the future. Qian Feilong naturally also realized this point. His expression instantly became complicated. Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest looked young. They did not expect their battle abilities to be so shocking. It had truly exceeded their expectations. The battle abilities of young people nowadays are truly shocking. It seems that we have underestimated them previously. Mu Ze nodded slightly. Since things have already come to this, we can only take care of one person at a time. It was naturally best if they did not offend them. However, the hatred between both parties was already so thick that it could not be resolved. Hence, they could only brace themselves and continue to kill one person at a time. Attack! Qian Feilong waved his hand and said. In the next moment, the group of cultivators directly charged forward. Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze was firm and sharp. She held the flowing light sword in her hand and did not retreat as she charged forward. The three beasties' speed was not slow either. Even if they were not opponents, they had to use all their strength to injure the other party. Ding ding ding. Bailey Hongzhuang and Qian Feilong directly engaged in battle. Qian Feilong's strength was at the 5th level of the Star Radiance realm. Even though Bailey Hongzhuang had already raised her aura to the 4th level of the Star Radiance realm, there was still a gap between them. Therefore, Qian Feilong had absolute confidence in dealing with Bailey Hongzhuang. He believed that Bailey Hongzhuang was definitely not his match. Although Bailey Hongzhuang had forcibly raised her cultivation through other means, he believed that Bailey Hongzhuang would not be able to maintain it for too long. In the end, Bailey Hongzhuang was doomed. Qian Feilong turned into a streak of blue light and rushed towards Bailey Hongzhuang as fast as lightning. He punched out, sending out billowing waves of air. Thunder Fist. Facing Qian Feilong's eerie lightning fist, Bailey Hongzhuang's flowing light sword also violently stabbed out. A tyrannical sword aura directly shot out from the flowing light sword. Ding! The wind from the fist and the sword aura collided together and resisted each other. Unexpectedly, no one was able to break through the other's attack. Qian Feilong's gaze suddenly froze. His heart was in a perilous situation. He did not expect that Bailey Hongzhuang's current combat power could actually go head-to-head with him. In the next moment, Qian Feilong did not dare to be careless and directly drew out a long rod. This long rod was completely black in color. However, the two ends of the rod were red. There were engravings of tigers and leopards on it. It looked ferocious and powerful, extremely fierce. Dong! Chapter 4159. Take this. The strong and ferocious strike carried a shocking force as it headed straight for Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang's figure flashed as she executed the shifting forms technique and dodged Qian Feilong's fatal strike. Bailey Hongzhuang, it's meaningless for you to rely on dodging. If you have the ability, fight me head-on. Qian Feilong sneered. The two of you are going against one of me, and you want me to fight you head-on? Qian Feilong, do you know how to write the word shame? Bailey Hongzhuang glanced sideways at the other cultivator, who was glaring at her like a tiger watching its prey. Not only did she have to deal with Qian Feilong's attack, she also had to guard against this fellow, who was ready to launch a sneak attack at any time. Naturally, she had to be extra careful. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Qian Feilong's expression was rather awkward. At this moment, Li Buoyou finally managed to rush over. His energy center was crippled, and he was no different from an ordinary person. Naturally, he could not keep up with everyone's speed. Even though he had chased after them for a long time before finally catching up, his entire face was pale, and he was on the verge of collapsing. If it were not for the fact that he wanted to witness Bailey Hongzhuang's death with his own eyes, he would not have risked his life. Now he had placed all his hatred for his energy center being crippled on Bailey Hongzhuang. He felt that Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest had clearly grasped the method to enter the black pool, but they had stood there and watched him make a fool of himself. As a result, he had ended up in such a state. Feilong, fight her head-on and let her know how powerful you are. Li Buoyou spoke, then looked mockingly at Bailey Hongzhuang. I'll let you die in peace. Do you think that Feilong can't deal with you alone? Qian Feilong nodded. That's right. I'll fight you head-on now. I'd like to see how long you can last. Hearing that, Bailey Hongzhuang chuckled and her dark eyes turned sharp and cold. All right, let's try. A proud smile appeared in Qian Feilong's eyes. This Bailey Hongzhuang was still too naive. If Bailey Hongzhuang continued to hide, he would have to spend a lot of effort to deal with her. After all, her movement technique was better than his. Now that Bailey Hongzhuang had agreed to stop hiding, she was definitely no match for him. However, Bailey Hongzhuang had the same idea at the moment. She didn't expect to be able to take care of everyone. As long as she could take care of one person, that would be good enough. If the two of them had besieged her, it would have been really inconvenient for her to make a move. However, since Qian Feilong had jumped into this pit himself, her success rate had greatly increased. Just as Qian Feilong was about to attack Bailey Hongzhuang, he discovered that Bailey Hongzhuang's aura suddenly changed. A cold and bloodthirsty murderous intent exploded with her as the epicenter. The surrounding temperature seemed to have dropped under this murderous intent, causing his hairs to stand on end. When he raised his eyes again, he was shocked to find that Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes had turned blood red. Looking into her eyes, he saw a terrifying mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. The thick and viscous blood caused his body to turn cold. Qian Feilong's eyes instantly widened. He couldn't imagine how the young Bailey Hongzhuang could experience such a terrifying scene. Immediately after that, he felt his movements become sluggish. His entire being was immersed in that kind of emotion. Even Bailey Hongzhuang in front of him seemed to have become invincible. Chapter 4160. While Qian Feilong was in a daze, Bailey Hongzhuang's figure suddenly swept across. The sharp sword pierced towards Qian Feilong without hesitation. Although Qian Feilong was immersed in shock, he still reacted at the critical moment. His figure immediately flashed and avoided the vital points, but his body was still injured by Bailey Hongzhuang. The flowing light sword directly pierced a bloody hole in the opponent's body, and fresh blood kept flowing out. The pain stimulated Qian Feilong, and only then did Qian Feilong react. His face instantly turned ugly. He had previously threatened to teach Bailey Hongzhuang a lesson, but he didn't expect to be seriously injured by her in the blink of an eye. It was really a slap in the face. Li Buoyou couldn't help but be stunned. He really didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang to be able to injure Qian Feilong. He couldn't help but ask, Feilong, what are you thinking? He didn't understand what was going on. Qian Feilong was actually standing there foolishly, waiting for Bailey Hongzhuang to attack. Qian Feilong glanced at Li Buoyou with a complicated expression. For a moment he didn't know how to explain. The scene just now was too strange, but it was obvious that he was the only one who saw it. Even if he explained, no one would believe him, so he could only swallow this loss. Seeing that Qian Feilong was silent, Li Buoyou couldn't help but speak again. Feilong, quickly kill her. Hearing that, Qian Feilong nodded and immediately attacked Bailey Hongzhuang again. Gold and iron clashed. Qian Feilong obviously hated Bailey Hongzhuang to a certain extent, and his attacks became increasingly fierce. The three beasts were facing the enemy cultivator's siege, and the pressure was immense. At this moment, their biggest enemy was Mu Zhe. Other than Mu Zhe, they still had the strength to fight against the other cultivators. But Mu Zhe's cultivation was much stronger than theirs, so they were restrained in all aspects. Originally, Mu Zhe and the others also released their own contract beasts. But when they released their contract beasts, they found that in the face of Bailey Hongzhuang's 3 contract beasts, their contract beasts did not dare to move half a step. Under such circumstances, everyone realized how amazing these 3 contracted beasts were. There was an absolute level restriction between demonic beasts. Therefore, as long as they encountered a demonic beast whose level was far higher than theirs, the lower-level demonic beasts would not have the slightest intention of resisting. Under such circumstances, the cultivators of the Crimson Moon sect had no choice but to deal with the 3 mystical beasts themselves. Bailey Hongzhuang directly released her killing aura. Immediately after, Qian Feilong and the others immediately felt as if they were immersed in a wave of pressure. Their auras were directly suppressed. Noticing this, the cultivators present could not help but be stunned. The shock in their eyes when they looked at Bailey Hongzhuang became even more intense. What powerful battle power! Mu Zhe stared at Bailey Hongzhuang in astonishment. He had thought that dealing with Bailey Hongzhuang would be an easy task. He never thought that she would be able to force them into such a situation. How shocking! Qian Feilong could not help but feel jealous. Bailey Hongzhuang was so young, yet she had so many tricks up her sleeves. It was simply too enviable. It seems that we can't underestimate Bailey Hongzhuang. It's a good thing that Bewitching is still in the ruins. Otherwise, if the 2 of them were to join forces, they might cause quite a bit of trouble for us. Chapter 4161. At this moment, Li Buoyou understood that he could not allow Bailey Hongzhuang to continue on like this. Otherwise, if Bailey Hongzhuang were to have the opportunity to break out of their encirclement, that would be terrible. Feilong, don't mind what you said previously. You and Mu Zhe can attack Bailey Hongzhuang together. Hearing Li Buoyou's words, Qian Feilong and Mu Zhe could not help but frown. Even though they wanted to kill Bailey Hongzhuang, going back on their words in front of a woman was a little embarrassing. Bailey Hongzhuang laughed icily. Li Buoyou, to think that you used to be the big senior brother of the Crimson Moon sect. Your way of doing things is much worse than the Punglai Palace. From what I can see, you're only pretending to be a gentleman on the surface. In reality, you're a despicable villain. If this had been in the past, Li Buoyou might have been angered by Bailey Hongzhuang's words. However, now that he has become a cripple, he naturally did not care about such remarks. As long as he could achieve everything he wanted, nothing else mattered. Bailey Hongzhuang, there's no need for you to provoke me. So what if I'm a despicable villain? Those teammates of yours who claimed to be gentlemen had all died under my schemes. Soon you'll die too. No matter how good your performance is, you'll only lose your life in the end. If you have the ability, you should avenge your dead comrades. Li Buoyou smiled complacently. In this round, Bailey Hongzhuang had lost in the end. She had lost miserably. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes suddenly sharpened. Whenever she thought of Shangguan Yingying, Wen Ziren, Mo Yunjue and the other smiling faces, her eyes became bloodshot. They had all come to Punglai Island for her and Beichen's sake. However, they had all lost their lives because of them. And the instigator of all of this was Li Buoyou. Li Buoyou. Bailey Hongzhuang gritted her teeth. Even if I die here today, I will kill you. Give it a try then. Li Buoyou shrugged. He was not afraid of Bailey Hongzhuang's words at all. It was impossible for Bailey Hongzhuang, who was currently surrounded, to kill him. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang attacked Qian Feilong directly, and Qian Feilong quickly responded. However, he was already injured by Bailey Hongzhuang's previous attack, so he couldn't deal with Bailey Hongzhuang the same as before. Mu Zhe was a little hesitant. But after seeing Qian Feilong fall into a disadvantageous position under Bailey Hongzhuang's attacks, he could only rush over to help. They had already suffered too many losses here. They could not afford to have any more casualties. Xiao He, Xiao Bai, and White Lion were already injured. Although they were very fast, their opponents were stronger than them. Naturally, they were injured. White Lion's fur had already been dyed red with blood. A thick murderous intent flickered in his eyes. These fellows before him were extremely abominable. Unfortunately, he could not share his master's burden. If only his cultivation could be a little more powerful. Previously, he had already touched the barrier to the starlight state, but had not been able to break through in the end. As Xiao He and Xiao Bai could change their forms at any time, their injuries were slightly lighter. After all, they had the upper hand. However, after the Crimson Moon sex cultivators had understood this characteristic of theirs, the effects of their attack had greatly weakened. The wounds on their bodies gradually increased, and their attacks were no longer as fierce as before. Chapter 4162. Hence, no matter how serious the injuries on their bodies were, they did not have any intention of retreating. They wanted to persevere and fight till the end with their master. Even if they were to die, they wanted to die with a bang and fight till the very last of their strength. Bailey Hongzhuang naturally noticed Mu Zhe's actions, and her heart sank. Once Mu Zhe joined the battle, then she would be trapped. Thinking of this, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes flashed with a trace of ruthlessness as she took on Mu Zhe's palm. Mu Zhe saw that Bailey Hongzhuang did not dodge his attack, and a trace of astonishment surfaced in his eyes. Although the angle of his attack was a little tricky, Bailey Hongzhuang could still dodge it. But Bailey Hongzhuang did not even dodge. Could it be that she knew that she was going to die, so she did not even plan to dodge? But in the next moment, Mu Zhe understood the reason why Bailey Hongzhuang did this. Because after Bailey Hongzhuang took on his attack, she immediately charged towards Li Boyo. Li Boyo did not expect Bailey Hongzhuang to attack him without any regard for the consequences, and a thick fear surfaced on his face as he shouted, "Quick! Stop her quickly!" Qian Feilong immediately took action, but Bailey Hongzhuang was good at speed, and even if he chased after her, he was still unable to stop her. Li Boyo saw the situation and quickly ran backwards. But how could he, who had turned into a normal person, be Bailey Hongzhuang's opponent? Bailey Hongzhuang's attack landed mercilessly on Li Boyo's back. Bang! Li Boyo's figure fell onto the ground with a loud crash, as he started to spit out large mouthfuls of blood. How could a normal cultivator withstand a merciless attack from a Star Radiance realm practitioner? Instantly, Li Boyo breathed out more than he breathed in. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were red and vicious. Li Boyo, didn't you say that you were arrogant? Even if I die, you will die first. Master, good job. When the three beasts saw Bailey Hongzhuang's actions, they all spoke out. This Li Boyo was the instigator, and if they did not kill him, they would not be able to rest in peace. Li Boyo stared blankly at Bailey Hongzhuang. Even if he had become a cripple, he still did not want to die. But he did not expect that Bailey Hongzhuang, who was bound to die, would be able to divert her attention to kill him. His eyes were wide open, and his face was filled with unwillingness, but he had no choice but to fall to the ground. Mu Zhe rushed to the back of Bailey Hongzhuang's attack. He had already made up his mind. He must kill Bailey Hongzhuang, otherwise there would be no end of trouble. Bailey Hongzhuang's palm collided with his, but a trace of blood quietly spilled from her lips. Mu Zhe's previous attack was also very powerful. She had also suffered serious internal injuries after forcefully withstanding that palm strike. But to be able to kill Li Boyo the instigator, she felt that it was worth it. When Mu Zhe saw that Bailey Hongzhuang was injured, he immediately grabbed hold of this opportunity. His ferocious attacks landed on Bailey Hongzhuang's body like raindrops. Bailey Hongzhuang tried her best to deal with the attacks, but was still hit occasionally. Qian Feilong had also rushed over. Bailey Hongzhuang had seriously injured him, and this made him feel that he had lost face. He must take revenge now. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were red from the killing, and the energy in her body was gradually dissipating. In order to support the killing aura and blood aura field, her energy consumption was extremely shocking. Chapter 4163. Bewitching, who was in the middle of accepting the inheritance, suddenly felt ill at ease. He felt as if he was about to lose the most important thing in his life. His heart ached, and even his breathing became difficult. Hong Zhuang. A solemn light flashed across his pitch-black eyes. To him, the most important thing was Bailey Hong Zhuang. Aside from that, there was no other possibility. Something must have happened to Hong Zhuang. Bewitching's expression turned ugly. Previously, he had directly entered the world created by the owner of the ruins. He had no idea what was going on outside. He only knew that Li Boyo and the others clearly hated his teammates. However, he thought that Wan Yinling and the others were nearby, so logically speaking, there shouldn't be any problems. However, the feeling that he had now was clearly warning him that Hong Zhuang was in danger. At the thought of this, he desperately wanted to finish accepting the inheritance so that he could help Hong Zhuang. No, I must get out of here as soon as possible. Bewitching's eyes were resolute and persistent. Hong Zhuang was the person he treasured the most. If anything happened to Hong Zhuang, he would not be able to bear the consequences. Ah! Xiao He let out a blood-curdling scream. A bloody hole had been pierced through its body by the other party. At this moment, blood had dyed its white fur red. When Xiao Bai and Bai Shi saw this, they only wanted to help Xiao He. Unfortunately, their situation was not much better than Xiao He's. The difference in numbers between the two parties was simply too great. Even though the owner had done his best, there was still a gap. Noticing Xiao He's blood-curdling screams, Bailey Hong Zhuang could not help but turn away. Her blood-red eyes were moist. All these years, the three beasts had always been by her side. She simply could not accept that the three beasts had died because of her. However, there was nothing she could do about the current situation. Taking advantage of Bailey Hong Zhuang's distraction, Qian Feilong's attack landed on Bailey Hong Zhuang's body. Bailey Hong Zhuang staggered back 2 steps. Her breathing gradually weakened, and her movements became sluggish. She felt very tired. Noticing her change, Qian Feilong felt that he had found an opportunity. As long as he took advantage of this opportunity, he would be able to kill Bailey Hong Zhuang. In the next moment, Qian Feilong seized Bailey Hong Zhuang's weakness and attacked her directly. Seeing this, Bailey Hong Zhuang's eyes flashed, but her lips hooked up in a strange smile. Let's die together. As soon as he finished speaking, the explosives appeared in Bailey Hong Zhuang's hands. Then an earth-shattering explosion sounded. Bang! Boom boom boom! A huge explosion resounded, and the whole world seemed to shake because of this deafening sound. A huge crater appeared, flattening the place where Bailey Hong Zhuang and the others were standing. After Bewitching had left the ruins, he realized that there was no one around. Just as he was thinking about where to look for Bailey Hong Zhuang, he suddenly heard a deafening sound. He could not help but turn around and look behind him. He knew that this was the sound of Bailey Hong Zhuang's explosives. Unless there was no other choice, Bailey Hong Zhuang would never use explosives. His premonition had not been wrong. Hong Zhuang was really in danger. Chapter 4164. Till his death, Qian Feilong had never thought that Bailey Hong Zhuang would actually use such a big move at the very end. Ever since he had suffered a loss at the hands of Chu Jinfeng, he had always been on guard against Bailey Hong Zhuang using such a move. Even Mu Zhe and the rest had always been on guard against this. However, Bailey Hong Zhuang had never used this move, so he gradually let down his guard. Only, he never thought that at the very last moment, Bailey Hong Zhuang would actually use explosives. Not only that, this explosive was much more powerful than the one that Chu Jinfeng had used previously. By the time Qian Feilong realized all this, it was already too late. He only felt a sharp pain, and his entire body was torn into pieces by the power of the explosive. When Bewitching arrived, all he saw was a mess. The huge deep pit was surrounded by a faint smell of blood. At a glance, he could even see broken limbs and broken bones. It was a miserable sight. However, Bewitching did not have the mood to pay attention to all this. He was only looking for Bailey Hong Zhuang's figure. The only thing he wanted to confirm was that Bailey Hong Zhuang was fine. As long as Bailey Hong Zhuang was fine, then he could be at ease. Otherwise, that kind of situation was something that he did not dare to imagine. However, Bewitching looked around and did not see Bailey Hongzhuang's figure at all. His face instantly turned extremely ugly. Mu Zhe's arm had been directly blown off. He stared blankly at this scene, his eyes filled with an inconceivable light. Even though he felt that Bailey Hongzhuang was not a simple person, but this counterattack made him stunned. His body was burning with pain, but he felt as if he had fallen into a dream. He did not dare to believe that all of this was actually real. Such a huge disparity, and yet they had still paid such a huge price. How? How is this possible? Mu Zhe was puzzled. He had experienced so many big and small battles, but only this battle left the deepest impression on him. If his reaction had been just a little slower, he would have lost his life. Indescribable regret spread in his heart. If he had known that this would be the result, even if Li Buoyo thought that he was heartless, he would not have wanted to pay such a price. Bailey Hongzhuang's figure inexplicably became incomparably tall in his mind, and an indescribable fear arose in his heart. He was no match for Bailey Hongzhuang. He, who was at the 5th stage of the Starlight Realm, was actually not a match for Bailey Hongzhuang, who was at the 2nd stage of the Starlight Realm. He understood that this was an inner demon. Cultivators were most afraid of encountering inner demons. Once they were unable to overcome it, they would be unable to advance their cultivation for the rest of their lives. However, based on the current situation, he didn't have the confidence to overcome this inner demon. Mu Zhe was not the only one who was stunned. The remaining 3 cultivators from Crimson Moon sect could not help but stare blankly at this scene. In the blink of an eye, only the 4 of them were left in their team. When they first came to the ruins, there were more than 20 people, but now there were only 4 of them left, and they were either injured or disabled. How were they going to return under such circumstances? How were they going to explain this to the cultivators from Crimson Moon sect? Even though they'd survived the battle, they knew very well that they'd lost the battle, and they'd lost completely. Chapter 4165. Just as Mu Zhe and the rest were in a daze, a figure suddenly appeared in front of them. Where are Hongzhuang and the rest? Bewitching's deep eyes were filled with coldness and ruthlessness. He suppressed his surging murderous intent and asked. Hearing Bewitching's question, Mu Zhe and the rest could not help but be slightly stunned. They did not realize who was speaking. However, when they saw the cultivator standing in front of them clearly, their faces suddenly turned pale, and a trace of fear emerged in their hearts. Bewitching. Mu Zhe looked at Bewitching's cold eyes in horror. If he had met Bewitching before, he would not have panicked like he was now. However, everything that Bailey Hongzhuang had done before had really shocked him. Bailey Hongzhuang had already caused them to fall into such a tragic situation. Now that Bewitching was here, did it not mean that they were completely finished? At this moment, he did not doubt that if Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching had joined forces, they would have been completely wiped out. Let me ask you, where are Hongzhuang and the rest? Bewitching raised his voice, and the threat in his voice became more intense. Mu Zhe slowly opened his mouth, but thousands of thoughts ran through his mind. Then he said, I don't know. He knew that if Bewitching knew that Bailey Hongzhuang had died in their hands, the latter would never let them go. Although he had suffered a huge blow, he did not want to die here. Even if his cultivation could not progress in the future, he could live well with his current cultivation. If he lost his life, he would lose everything. You don't know? Bewitching raised his eyebrows, but his eyes became colder and sharper. Being stared at by Bewitching's sharp eyes, Mu Zhe felt inexplicably guilty. Logically speaking, Bewitching had clearly appeared later, and Bailey Hongzhuang did not leave anything behind. As long as he did not admit it, Bewitching would not know everything at all. Thinking of this, Mu Zhe decided to insist on his statement. Otherwise he would really be in danger. Yes, I've never seen them at all. The remaining cultivators from the 3 radiances were also frightened out of their wits by the previous incident. No matter what Mu Zhe said, they would agree with him. As soon as Mu Zhe finished speaking, Bewitching directly grabbed his neck with one hand. His gaze was as sharp as a knife. The movement just now was clearly caused by Hongzhuang's explosives, and the deep pit here. And you're telling me that you've never seen them? Tightening his right hand, Bewitching's eyes were bloodshot. When he saw this scene, he already had a bad premonition in his heart. He just did not want to admit it. He urgently needed Mu Zhe to give him an answer, to tell him that Hong Zhuang and the others were still fine. Seeing that Bewitching had directly exposed his lie, Mu Zhe's expression turned ugly. He did not expect Bewitching to be able to recognize the traces. Mu Zhe's right hand was already gone, and only his left hand was left. Faced with Bewitching's grip, he was powerless. He could only struggle with all his might, but was unable to break free. Are you going to talk or not? Bewitching increased the strength in his hand, and his eyes were cold. Clearly, if Mu Zhe did not answer, he would not hesitate to strangle him to death. I'll talk, cough, cough. I'll talk. Chapter 4166. Seeing this, Bewitching loosened his grip a little, his eyes blazing like a raging fire. Speak. Bailey Hongzhuang, she. Mu Zhe's face was filled with confusion. He simply did not know how to answer. If he did not answer, Bewitching would definitely kill him. But if he answered, Bewitching would still kill him. What happened to her? If I tell you, can you let me live? Mu Zhe could not help but ask. If he could, he really wanted to leave this place forever and never meet Bewitching again. You have no right to negotiate with me. Bewitching's gaze suddenly turned cold. Since you are not willing to speak, then you can just die. Without waiting for Mu Zhe to react, Bewitching's hand suddenly tightened, elemental energy surging in without hesitation, and directly snapped Mu Zhe's neck. Until the moment of his death, Mu Zhe still could not believe that he had died just like that. Bewitching's bloody method could not help but shock the remaining 3 practitioners. The 3 of them could not help but shiver. Looking at Bewitching, who was gradually walking towards them, they only felt that this guy was completely a demon. However, the most powerful cultivators in their team had already died, and the cultivation of the 3 of them was below the Starlight Realm. It was simply impossible for them to be Bewitching's opponent. Are you guys going to speak or not? Bewitching coldly asked. The 3 practitioners nodded repeatedly. If Mu Zhe did not speak, and Bewitching was so decisive in killing them, if they did not speak, their fate would naturally not be any better than Mu Zhe's. Bailey Hongzhuang is already dead. One of the practitioners among the 3 hurriedly said. As soon as this was said, Bewitching's expression suddenly changed. The originally gloomy and somewhat calm face suddenly collapsed, and the gaze he looked at the other party was incomparably terrifying. What did you say? The low and deep voice suddenly rose, filled with shock and ruthlessness. Li Buoyo has been waiting outside the ruins. After Bailey Hongzhuang came out, he chased her all the way here. Bailey Hongzhuang did everything she could to kill Li Buoyo and everyone else. However, she also paid a price and perished together with them. The cultivator quickly explained. Bewitching fell into silence. His hands gradually clenched. His nails dug into his palms, dripping with blood, but he didn't feel it at all. He knew that Bailey Hongzhuang was in danger. He only felt that kind of panic when something happened to Hongzhuang. However, he did not expect that he was still too late. Hongzhuang had actually fallen. He didn't confirm it again, because he knew that the other party didn't have the guts to deceive him at this time. And the mess in front of him clearly told him this. Her heart was in so much pain that she was suffocating. Bewitching only felt that he had fallen into darkness in an instant. That kind of pain was simply indescribable with words. It was as if his entire person had sunk into darkness, and he couldn't see the slightest bit of hope. His heart felt as if it had been hollowed out in an instant, and his entire person became numb. The goal of moving forward in life had become nothingness at this moment, and it was as if there was no longer any meaning in living. That Xiren and the others are also dead? Bewitching asked. No, only Run Zihang and Chu Jinfeng died. The others all ran away. Chapter 4167. However, Bewitching was completely immersed in the news that Bailey Hongzhuang had fallen, and did not have the energy to care about all this. He could only say that when Xiren and the rest were still alive. This made him feel less remorseful and more comforted. However, from the moment Bailey Hongzhuang had fallen, his world had collapsed. Hong Zhuang had saved his life, and his happiness had been given to him by Hong Zhuang. Now that Hong Zhuang was no longer around, what was the point of him living on? Crimson Moon Sect. Li Boyo. A strong sense of hatred surged in Di Beichen's chest, and his eyes instantly turned blood red. In all these years, he had never hated anyone so bitterly, because this damned fellow had ruined everything for him. His mind kept replaying Bailey Hongzhuang's voice and smile, recalling all the good things she had done, recalling how they had known each other and fallen in love. These blissful memories pierced through his heart. I've already told you everything. Can you spare my life? The cultivator asked probingly. Di Beichen's heart was already in agony. Now that he heard that these murderers of Hong Zhuang wanted him to spare their lives, the flames of fury in his heart instantly ignited. In the next moment, Di Beichen did not hesitate to take the man's life. All of you deserve to die. Another cultivator saw Di Beichen's decisive killing intent, and immediately fled in another direction without hesitation. Di Beichen clearly wanted to kill all of them, and would not let them go. If he did not take this opportunity to escape, he would never have another chance. However, Di Beichen did not give him the chance to escape. He had already locked onto him the moment he had set off. Once the Starlight Realm technique was used, the man immediately lost his life in his hands. He understood that Li Boyo had long become a cripple. Based on his abilities, he would not be able to harm Hong Zhuang at all. The most hateful ones were these accomplices. If it had not been for them, how could Hong Zhuang have fallen? He wanted these people to pay the price. He wanted the Crimson Moon sect to pay the price. Di Beichen walked up to the last cultivator. This cultivator's leg had been injured by Chu Jinfeng's explosives, so he could not move at all. He could only watch as Di Beichen slowly walked towards him, and felt that death was drawing closer and closer to him. Just as Di Beichen was about to attack him, he hurriedly cried out, "Master Di, I have a piece of news for you. Please spare my life." "I don't care what news you have to say." Di Beichen's heart had turned cold. Ever since he had found out that Hong Zhuang was no longer around, he no longer cared about anything. Seeing that Di Beichen was about to attack him, the cultivator hurriedly cried out, "What if I tell you that Bailey Hong Zhuang is not dead?" "What do you mean by that?" Di Beichen's dark eyes, which were like a pool of stagnant water, suddenly released a ray of light. He fixed his gaze on the cultivator. "You're saying that Hong Zhuang is not dead?" "That's right." The cultivator hurriedly nodded. Even though Di Beichen had been pleasantly surprised when the cultivator had said that, after thinking about it carefully, he understood that the cultivator must have been lying to him. Everyone believed that Hong Zhuang was dead. How could he have a different answer? Chapter 4168. Trying to trick me? Di Beichen's lips curved into a dangerous arc. "It's useless." "No." The cultivator quickly nodded. "I'm not lying to you. I'm telling the truth." However, Di Beichen ignored him. Seeing this, the cultivator spilled the beans and told them everything that he had seen before. "I didn't attack Bailey Hongzhuang really. I was already injured before. After they brought me here, they attacked Bailey Hongzhuang. I stayed where I was the whole time, so I saw everything clearly. Bailey Hongzhuang did intend to die together with Qian Feilong. After she ignited the explosives, I thought she was dead for sure. But at that moment, I clearly saw a white light flash and went inside. I swear, I didn't see it wrongly. Believe me." The cultivator's face was filled with anxiety. Indeed, he did not make a move. Furthermore, he had witnessed the scene unfold before his very eyes. Although he was a little surprised when he saw it, after thinking about it, he felt that there was only one possibility. The white light clearly came from Bailey Hongzhuang's angle. Bailey Hongzhuang must have used some mysterious method to leave. Ever since he saw Bailey Hongzhuang's abnormal fighting power, he felt that there was nothing Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't do. It was possible to come back from the dead. If you don't believe me, you can look around. Even if there was an explosion and a lot of things dissipated, there should still be some traces left, right? There's nothing here that has anything to do with Bailey Hongzhuang. There's nothing even related to the 3 contracted beasts. It's impossible that everything was destroyed so easily. Di Beichen originally thought that the cultivator was lying to him. But looking at how confident the cultivator was, and how reasonable his words were, he suddenly felt that it was possible. He glanced at the cultivator. Now that the cultivator couldn't leave with his own strength, he didn't have to worry. In the next moment, he began to search the surroundings. Originally, he didn't want to face all of this, but now that he thought that there was still a chance of survival, he urgently hoped that all of this was true. As long as Bailey Hongzhuang was still alive, it would be the happiest thing for him. Sure enough, there was no trace of Bailey Hongzhuang around. Only then did he ask, "Is what you said true?" The cultivator nodded repeatedly. "It's true. I saw it with my own eyes." Bewitching turned to look at the skeleton army in the distance. He knew that this was the entrance to the upper realm that Ao Lingxiao had mentioned. Could it be that Hongzhuang had no other choice and was forced to enter the entrance to the upper realm? "Alright, I'll believe you this time." He didn't know if the other party was trying to trick him into entering the army of skeletons, but as long as there was a possibility, he had to try. "Master D, look at me. I really can't do anything to Bailey Hongzhuang. Can you spare me on account of the information I've given you?" Hearing this, Bewitching calmly glanced at him. The wound on the other party's leg was clearly not from today, so it was quite believable. "Alright, I won't kill you this time." Chapter 4169. There was no one else here except for him. Coupled with the frequent appearance of the skeleton army, it would be impossible for him to leave this place alive. After seeing Bewitching leave, the cultivator could not help but heave a sigh of relief. However, looking at the scene in front of him, everyone was already dead. He was the only one left here struggling at death's door. After rejoicing for a while, he understood his situation. If there were other cultivators alive in the team, then he could still return. However, with his current state, could it be that he had to crawl back? If he encountered the skeleton army along the way, with his crawling speed, only death would await him. Bewitching charged all the way inside. When the skeleton army saw someone appear, they began to attack one after another. Bewitching used his strongest technique, using all the skeletons in front of him as targets to vent his anger. His advancing speed could be said to be extremely shocking. He desperately searched around in all directions, only wanting to find Bailey Hongzhuang's figure. However, no matter how he called out Hongzhuang's name, there was no response at all. His heart gradually sank. He had finally found a glimmer of hope with great difficulty. Was it going to be destroyed again? He was unwilling to give up. As Bewitching searched all the way inside, after breaking through layers of obstacles, he finally arrived at the entrance to the upper realm. Looking at the entrance from afar, Bewitching felt a pang of heartache. Previously, he had agreed with Hongzhuang that they would enter the upper realm together after when Ziren and Shangguan Yingying had reached the Starlight Realm. He knew that Hongzhuang had misgivings about his feelings and had always wanted to help him find his family. He also hoped that he could find his family together with Hongzhuang. To him, as long as Hongzhuang was happy, it was fine. However, now suddenly Bewitching's gaze focused. He noticed that there was clearly a hairpin left on the ground in front of the entrance. Looking at the familiar hairpin in front of him, Bewitching was wild with joy in an instant. "This is Hongzhuang's hairpin." Bewitching's face was filled with ecstasy. It seemed that the cultivator from before did not lie to him. Hongzhuang is not dead. Bewitching's eyes were filled with joy. At this moment, he felt as if he had risen from hell to heaven. God was not so cruel to him. Hongzhuang was still alive. Looking at the entrance in front of him, he walked in without hesitation. However, the moment Bewitching walked in, he clearly heard someone shouting behind him. "Beichen." Bewitching frowned slightly. This voice was not unfamiliar to him. It was Ziren's voice. However, by the time he heard it, he had already entered the teleportation array. It was too late for him to turn around. However, he was more anxious to find Bailey Hongzhuang. After the great battle, Bailey Hongzhuang must be severely injured. If he does not find Hongzhuang as soon as possible, Hongzhuang might be in danger. When Ziren stared at Bewitching, who had already entered the entrance, his expression was filled with exasperation. They had rushed over as quickly as they could, but they never thought that Bewitching would actually enter an entrance. What is this place? Shangguan Yingying stared at the entrance in front of her, as a thick sense of confusion appeared on her face. She did not know that there was such an entrance in this place. Diyujue, Long Yanwei, and Yizihua's faces filled with exasperation when they saw this. They had almost caught up to Bewitching. Chapter 4170. Young Master Bewitching has entered the upper realm. I'm afraid we'll have to trouble you to send someone to look for him. Long Yanwei looked at Diyujue. He knew that the latter had spent so many years to finally find Bewitching. Unfortunately, so many things had happened. Initially, they thought that they would finally be able to meet again. However, they were still one step away. One could imagine how terrible Diyujue's mood was at the moment. Diyujue's face darkened slightly as he stared at the entrance to the upper realm. He then said, "Of course." Although they did not manage to meet Bewitching this time, they now knew about Bewitching's identity, and that he had entered the upper realm. With the D family's means, it would not take them too long to find him. It just so happened that he was about to return to the upper realm to tell the news to his family, so that they would not be upset over this matter. No matter what, at least we know that Bewitching is fine. We can rest assured. A smile appeared on Yizihua's face. The moment he saw that Bewitching was safe, he was relieved. At least Bewitching was still alive. If Bewitching had fallen, then they would be in big trouble. Fortunately, things were not that bad. It was just that Diyujue would have to spend a little more time looking for him. However, with the D family's means, it would not take long at all. The upper realm? Xiren and Shangguan Yingying looked at each other. There was a trace of doubt in their hearts. They did not understand what Yizihua and the others were talking about. Since Bewitching has already entered, why don't we just go in and look for them? Xiren could not help but ask. The entrance was right in front of them. They just had to go through it, and they would be able to find it. Why bother? Xiren, you don't know this, but the first time we enter this teleportation, we are randomly sent. Even if we go over now, we may not be able to be in the same place as Bewitching. Yizihua shrugged, his expression filled with helplessness. If they could see Bewitching as long as they passed through, they would not hesitate here. Listening to Yizihua's words, Xiren finally understood. He did not expect the teleportation to be so strange. No wonder Diyujue looked so helpless. However, he still didn't know where he was. In the next moment, Diyujue turned around and looked at the person beside him. He ordered, "Go to the Crimson Moon sect now and ask the sect master to give me an explanation. I'll return to the upper realm first." Now that Bewitching had gone to the upper realm alone, he probably did not have enough understanding of the situation there. Accidents could happen at any time. Now that he knew that Bewitching was his son, his feelings as a father were fully displayed. He was constantly worried that Bewitching would be in danger. Therefore, he had to return immediately and send someone to look for Bewitching. Yes. Hearing this, Long Yanwei and Yizihua looked at each other. They could tell from Diyujue's tone that he was very displeased with the Crimson Moon sect. If they were not in a hurry to find Bewitching, they would have charged straight to the Crimson Moon sect. Even so, the Crimson Moon sect would still have to give Diyujue a satisfactory answer. Otherwise, the Crimson Moon sect would be in deep trouble. Soon after, Diyujue turned around and looked at Long Yanwei and Yizihua. He said, "Both of you, I'll take my leave first." "Take care," Long Yanwei and Yizihua replied. Chapter 4171. Xiren Yingying, the two of you can't go to the upper realm yet. I'll go look for Bewitching first. Once I find Bewitching and Hong Zhuang, I'll bring them back. At that time, I'll bring the two of you along. Diyujue looked at Xiren and Shangguan Yingying with a very gentle gaze. The two of them were Bewitching's best friends. If it wasn't for the fact that the two of them had yet to break through to the Starlight Realm, he would have directly brought them to the D family. However, the upper realm had a rule that those who weren't born in the upper realm and hadn't reached the Starlight Realm weren't allowed to enter. However, Xiren and Shangguan Yingying were already at the 9th level of the Purple Realm. They weren't far from breaking through to the Starlight Realm. He believed that with their aptitude, It shouldn't take too much time. Thank you, uncle. Xiren and Shangguan Yingying hurriedly cupped their hands. Ever since they found out that Di Yujue was Di Beichen's father, they changed the way they addressed him. Originally, they completely treated Di Yujue as a member of the same generation. Now that Di Yujue had suddenly become an elder, they sighed in their hearts. In the next moment, Di Yujue directly walked through the entrance under everyone's gaze. Only after Di Yujue left did Wen Xiren and Shangguan Yingying look at Long Yanwei and Yizihua like curious babies. At this moment, they were really full of doubts. They completely didn't understand what had happened. Why can't we go to the upper realm? Only those who have reached the Starlight Realm can enter the upper realm. There's a restriction in this transportation array. If you haven't reached that level, you won't be able to enter at all, Yizihua replied. Hearing this, Wen Xiren and Shangguan Yingying finally understood. So that's how it is. The two of us aren't qualified. Shangguan Yingying frowned slightly. From the looks of it, if we want to find Beichen and the others, we must quickly break through to the Starlight Realm. Otherwise, we won't be able to go at all. Ever since they came to Penglai Island, the four of them had been traveling together. Now that Beichen and Hong Zhuang had suddenly disappeared, the two of them were not used to it. When Xiren nodded slightly, they indeed had to raise their cultivation as soon as possible. Instructor Yi, what is the upper realm? Shangguan Yingying asked curiously. Previously, she had never heard of any information about the upper realm. Now, she had to know what kind of place it was. Let's go. We'll talk on the way back. All right. It hurts. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but frown. Pain came from all over her body, and even moving became difficult. Wait, I can still feel pain. Bailey Hongzhuang was slightly stunned. She had clearly charged over to perish together with Qian Feilong. Why could she still feel pain? Immediately, Bailey Hongzhuang's heart was filled with joy. Since she could still feel pain, it meant that she was still alive. However, in the next second, she felt a little worried. This feeling was so similar to the last time she had transmigrated. This kind of thing shouldn't happen again, right? Now, she only hoped that she would have the chance to see Beichen again. Otherwise, being alive wasn't something to be happy about. As she slowly opened her eyes, she felt that everything around her was extremely unfamiliar. She had never seen anything like this before. She couldn't help but panic. Then, a handsome face appeared in front of her eyes. However, it was blurry and she couldn't see it clearly. She wanted to speak, but she didn't have the strength. Her eyes turned black, and she fell into darkness again. Miss, are you all right? Miss. Chapter 4172. When Bailey Hongzhuang finally regained consciousness, she found herself in her room. However, there was no one else in the room. Xiao Hei. Xiao Bai. Bai Shi. Bailey Hongzhuang hurriedly called out. She desperately wanted to know how the three beasts were doing. After such a great battle, the three beasts' injuries were extremely severe. It was obvious that they could not hold on any longer. She wondered how they were doing. At the same time, she wanted to confirm one thing. Was she still in the Shengxian continent? However, her answer did not receive any response. She could not help but feel a chill in her heart. Could it be, at this moment, the tightly shut door suddenly opened. Creak. A young handsome figure walked in. When he saw that Bailey Hongzhuang had regained consciousness, the man's face immediately lit up with a joyful smile. Miss, you're awake? Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the unfamiliar, yet somewhat familiar face. It was as if she had seen this face before she had lost consciousness. Thank you for saving me, sir. Bailey Hongzhuang cupped her hands in greeting. The man smiled and waved his hand. It's nothing much. Don't mention it. Your injuries are very serious. I've found a physician to take a look at you. The physician said that as long as you're awake, you'll be fine. However, these injuries will require some time to recover. If you feel any discomfort, feel free to tell me. There's no need to be courteous. Bailey Hongzhuang was a little surprised when she saw the other party's warm demeanor. Then, a relieved smile appeared on her face. It seems that this cultivator before her was very helpful. Thank you, I'm fine. She could see the bandages on her body. Although her injuries were still serious, they would no longer threaten her life. She only needed to rest for a while, and she would be able to make a complete recovery. There would not be any sequelae. That's good. The man smiled faintly. I've just gone to get some food for you. You've been unconscious for a few days. I'm sure you're hungry, right? Looking at the food in the man's hand, Bailey Hongzhuang immediately understood. There is indeed some food. Thank you so much. I'm Bailey Hongzhuang. How should I address you, young master? Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were filled with gratitude. Before, her injuries were so serious. If no one had saved her, she really couldn't imagine what she would have become. Fortunately, his luck was not bad. He was saved by someone, and this person was a very good person. I'm Wanyan Han. I'm very happy to meet you. Wanyan Han smiled. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows slightly. She vaguely felt that she had heard this name somewhere before, but she couldn't remember where. Young Master Wanyan, may I ask where I am now? As she spoke, Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze became nervous. This was what she was most worried about now. She only hoped that she was still in the world she was in before. You're in Rong'an City now. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but be stunned. Rong'an City? She had never heard of this place, and did not know where Rong'an City was. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's puzzled expression, Wanyan Han immediately understood. He smiled and said, I forgot. This should be your first time in the upper realm, so you don't understand the situation here. Chapter 4173. You're saying that I'm now in the upper realm? Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes lit up when she heard the words upper realm. That was what she wanted to confirm the most at this moment. Aside from that, nothing else mattered. Wanyan Han nodded. That's right. Don't you know that you're now in the upper realm? I'm in the upper realm. Bailey Hongzhuang murmured to herself as a joyful smile appeared on her face. It seems that she was still alive. Even though she did not know how she had managed to reach the upper realm, as long as she was still alive, she would have the chance to see Bewitching again. Just this point alone was already the happiest thing of all. Lady Bailey, allow me to be nosy and ask, why were you so severely injured when you arrived? Could it be that you were injured during the battle with the skeleton army? Wanyan Han could not hide the puzzlement in his eyes. When he had first seen Bailey Hongzhuang had been lying unconscious at the entrance, covered in blood. When he had approached, Bailey Hongzhuang seemed to still be conscious. However, before she could say a word, she had fainted again. Hence, he had brought Bailey Hongzhuang back to the inn, and found a physician to treat her. Bailey Hongzhuang gently shook her head. I was surrounded and attacked. I had no choice. Even though Bailey Hongzhuang had explained it very simply, Wanyan Han understood immediately. You were surrounded and attacked in the training grounds? Who would besiege a woman like you? The members of the Crimson Moon sect. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes turned gloomy and cold at the mention of the Crimson Moon sect. If it had not been for these damned fellows, she would not have ended up in such a situation. However, she believes that her final attack must have caused them to pay a heavy price. Wanyan Han's eyes changed when he heard the words Crimson Moon sect. He asked, the members of the Crimson Moon sect had surrounded and attacked you. Are you a member of that organization as well? At first, Bailey Hongzhuang did not pay much attention to it. However, when she saw the sudden change in Wanyan Han's expression, she could not help but feel worried. Could Wanyan Han also be a member of the Crimson Moon sect? If that was the case, then it would be troublesome. I am from Penglai Palace, Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. Penglai Palace? A big smile appeared on Wanyan Han's face. You actually came from Penglai Palace? What a coincidence. I am also from the Penglai Palace. I didn't expect you to be my junior sister. Wanyan Han appeared to be very pleasantly surprised. He did not think that it would actually be so coincidental that the person he saved was his little junior sister. Bailey Hongzhuang was stunned for a moment before a smile appeared on her face. It turns out that Prince Wanyan is also from Penglai Palace. At this point, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes suddenly widened and she asked curiously, Young Master Wanyan, are you Wanyan Ling's brother? At this moment she suddenly understood. Previously, she had always felt that Wanyan Han's name was somewhat familiar. However, she could not remember where she had heard it from. Now that she knew that Wanyan Han was from Penglai Palace, She suddenly remembered that when Ren Ziheng introduced Wang Yanling to her, he had specially mentioned his elder brother, Wang Yanhan. However, Wang Yanhan had not appeared in Punglai Palace for a long time, because he had already come to the upper world. That's right. Wang Yanling is my younger brother. The smile on Wang Yanhan's face gradually widened. Is he doing well in Punglai Palace? She understood that Bewitching must be very worried about her safety now. He did not know how she was doing. Only after she went back could Bewitching be at ease. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Wang Yanhan could not help but frown and said, "You can't go back now?" "Why?" Bailey Hongzhuang was stunned. Her face was full of confusion. Chapter 4175. Hearing Wang Yanhan's words, Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze changed slightly. Thinking about it this way, it was indeed very reasonable. You should know that the cultivators in the upper realm, other than the younger ones, are all stronger than the cultivators in the lower realm. In fact, they are much stronger than the cultivators in the lower realm. If the cultivators from the upper realm go to the lower realm, who in the lower realm would be their match? Because of this, it would only destroy the balance in the lower realm. Therefore, there is a rule that the cultivators from the upper realm cannot go to the lower realm as they wish. However, the people from the upper realm would not want to go to the lower realm. After all, there is nothing better than the upper realm. On the contrary, it is very backward. Wang Yanhan explained. Bailey Hongzhuang frowned slightly, but still did not give up. Then under what circumstances can one go to the lower realm? This is very troublesome. First, one must stay in the upper realm for a long time and pass the examination of the upper realm's cultivators' union before one can go to the lower realm. If not, I would have gone back to see my brother long ago. However, looking at the current situation, I can only wait for him to go to the upper realm to meet up with him. So troublesome. Bailey Hongzhuang's clear eyes were filled with doubt. Previously, when she heard Ao Lingxiao say that going to the lower realm was not so troublesome, this Wang Yanhan should not have the need to lie to her. It is so troublesome. Ao Lingxiao's expression was filled with helplessness. Other than that, there is another possibility. However, it has nothing to do with us. What is it? I heard that the people from the upper realm's big forces can go to the lower realm as they wish, because the balance in the lower realm is also controlled by them. However, they belong to a big force and have their own restrictions. Therefore, after going to the lower realm, they will not run amok. Wang Yanhan slowly said. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang finally understood. No wonder Ao Lingxiao could go to the lower realm directly. It was related to his identity. Looking at it, the possibility of her going to the lower realm was very slim. Since it is so, then I only have one method. That is to go to the D family. Bailey Hongzhuang's phoenix-like eyes narrowed. She had no way to ascertain when Beichen would head to the upper realm, but she was certain that Beichen would definitely return to the Supreme D clan. After all, it was very likely that his family was located there. As long as she waited there, she would definitely see Beichen. Senior brother Wan Yan, do you know that there is a D clan in the upper realm? Bailey Hongzhuang asked. Wan Yanhan nodded slightly. After some thought he said, I think I've heard of it before. It's a top-notch clan, right? Why are you asking this? Then do you know where the D family is? Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes lit up. As long as she could find the D family, she would be able to reunite with Beichen sooner or later. I don't know about that. Wan Yanhan shook his head. This kind of great power is really too far away from us. I've only heard of its existence like a story, but it's only limited to the existence of this family. Other than that, I don't know anything about them. Then is there any way to find out? Bailey Hongzhuang asked unwillingly. Chapter 4176. Little junior sister, with our current strength, it's basically impossible for us to come into contact with such a large power. Moreover, we are surrounded by cultivators who are similar to us. I'm afraid that the information they know is more or less the same as us. They only feel that such a large power is unreachable, and they are unable to understand it. I heard that such a large power has a very strong invisible barrier. If there is no one leading the way, it's basically impossible for ordinary people to find it. Why are you looking for the D family? Wang Yanhan's face was filled with confusion. He completely couldn't understand why Bailey Hongzhuang had just come to the upper realm. Logically speaking, such a large power like the D family shouldn't have any connection with her. However, she had been trying to find the D family. This was really too strange. The reason why I came to the upper realm was completely by accident. My husband and my friends are still in the lower realm. They don't even know that I'm here. I'm sure that they are looking for me now. Previously we had heard of the D family. I feel that if I go near them, they might be able to reunite when they come to the upper realm in the future. Bailey Hongzhuang's reply was half true and half false. Right now, they weren't completely sure that Bewitching was a member of the D family. Before they were sure, it was better not to say anything. I see. Wang Yanhan finally understood. I didn't expect that little junior sister is already married. I'm sure that the other party must be a very outstanding young talent. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Indeed. Little junior sister, I understand your anxious feelings. However, there is no other way for now. Think about it. Since you are unable to find the D family, it would be similarly difficult for them to find you when they come. Therefore, why don't you recuperate first and slowly think of a way in the future? I believe that there will be a day when you two will reunite. Wang Yanhan smiled and said, Thank you, senior brother. I hope so. After Wang Yanhan left, Bailey Hongzhuang's face revealed a depressed expression. When she thought of Bewitching's expression when he thought that she might have died, she couldn't help but worry. Furthermore, judging from the situation at that time, there were definitely still people alive in the Crimson Moon sect. Once these people returned, the news of his death would basically be confirmed by them. Under such circumstances, Bewitching would definitely want to avenge him. In that case, not only would Bewitching be in danger, but he also didn't know when he would come to the upper realms. I never thought that things would turn out like this. Bailey Hongzhuang sighed faintly, her expression full of helplessness. At this moment, she suddenly felt a slight movement from the chaos ring. Her eyes lit up and she immediately entered the chaos ring. As expected, Bailey Hongzhuang immediately noticed that Xiao He and Xiao Bai had woken up. However, Bai Shi was still unconscious and showed no signs of waking up. Master! Xiao He and Xiao Bai were overjoyed to see Bailey Hongzhuang. Master, you're still alive. That's great. The two beasts heaved a sigh of relief. They had thought that they were all dead from their previous miserable state. They never thought that everyone was still alive. That was great. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. That's right. It's a good thing that we're still alive. Chapter 4177. I'm fine now. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. You're still worried about me. You should be worried about yourselves now. Your injuries are very serious as well. Even though I've already treated you, you'll still need some time to fully recover. There's no need to rush it. Hearing this, Xiao He and Xiao Bai appeared very carefree. As long as we're still alive, it's not a big deal. This situation was much better than what they had imagined. At least everyone was still alive. Injuries were a common occurrence. They had suffered many injuries on a daily basis, and were already used to it. However, Xiao He's gaze turned towards Bai Shi. Master, why hasn't there been any movement from Bai Shi even though we've already awakened? Logically speaking, Bai Shi's injuries should have been about the same as theirs. Since they had already awakened, Bai Shi should be more or less awake as well. However, based on Bai Shi's current condition, it was clear that he did not show any signs of awakening. Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but turn towards Bai Shi. Her expression was filled with deep thought. I've already checked on Bai Shi's condition. His injuries are very serious, but they are not life-threatening. As for the fact that he has not shown any signs of awakening, he should be about to break through. Bai Shi's cultivation speed has never been slow. This time, after absorbing the energy from the black pool, Bai Shi had even come into contact with the barrier to the starlight state. If this had been in the past, it would have taken some time for him to break through. However, he had been hovering on the brink of death in this battle. Perhaps Bai Shi had profited from this disaster and broken through. Upon hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's reply, Xiao He and Xiao Bai's initial worries turned into pleasant surprise. So that's how it is. That's great. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and nodded. Even though they had been in great danger this time, it was a good thing that they had managed to avert disaster in the end. However, they had been forced to separate from Beichen. This was something that she could not do anything about. Master, what are you thinking about? Noticing Bailey Hongzhuang's mood, Xiao He could not help but ask, did something happen that made you unhappy? Bailey Hongzhuang immediately told them about their current situation. After hearing everything, Xiao He and Xiao Bai could not help but be dumbfounded. They did not expect such a situation at all. In that case, we can only wait here for Beichen and the others to come? Not bad. According to my judgment, Beichen probably won't come alone. He will definitely wait for Xiren and Yingying to break through before coming. Although Yingying and the others are talented in cultivation, it will take some time for them to make a breakthrough. However, as long as we wait in Rong'an City, they will come sooner or later. If only it were that simple. Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head helplessly. This teleportation is random. I happen to be teleported to Rong'an City. There's no way to determine which city Beichen and the others will be teleported to. If it wasn't a city, they probably wouldn't have come here. Only the D family is where Beichen will definitely go. She did not expect such a situation at all. Now this was the only way she could think of. Xiao He and Xiao Bai could not help but be dumbfounded. In such a situation, they really could not think of a better way. Chapter 4178. By the way, do you know how we came to the upper realm? Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Xiao He and Xiao Bai. This was something that she had never been able to figure out. Back then, she had thought that she was definitely going to die. She never thought that she would actually survive in the end. However, even after thinking about it for a long time, she still could not figure out how she had managed to accomplish all this. I don't know. Xiao He shook her head. I thought that I was going to die. I don't know what happened after that. I did notice a flash of white light at the time. Then, I was taken back into the chaos ring. However, I don't know what happened after that, said Xiao Bai. A flash of white light. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows. A trace of astonishment appeared in her eyes. Xiao Bai nodded. That's right. There was a flash of white light. Although the scene was very chaotic, I still saw it clearly. Now that Xiao Bai has mentioned it, I remember that there was a flash of white light at the time. I thought that it was the light before death. Xiao He spread her hands and said innocently. It looks like that flash of white light saved us. Bailey Hongzhuang pondered. But, what was that white light? Xiao He and Xiao Bai shook their heads. They did not know either. They only remembered that something like that had happened before. Bailey Hongzhuang kept thinking. Usually, there was no such thing as a white light around her. Moreover, this white light had saved them, so it was obviously a kind gesture. Not only that, this white light should be very powerful. Otherwise, it would not have been able to save them. After some thought, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but turn her gaze to the unconscious white dragon not far away. She said, do you think this white light has something to do with the white dragon? As Bailey Hongzhuang spoke, Xiao He and Xiao Bai could not help but look at each other. Then they nodded and said, that is indeed possible. The white dragon is so powerful. It would have been able to take us away under those circumstances. However, the white dragon was already unconscious. How could it have taken us away at the critical moment? We can't say for sure now. We will know once the white dragon awakens. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly said. This was the only possibility that she could think of at the moment. Apart from this, she really could not imagine where the white light had come from. Let's hope that the white lion and the white dragon will wake up soon, Xiao He said with a smile. No matter what, they were in a good situation now. They just needed some time to regroup. In the following days, Bailey Hongzhuang recuperated and rested in the inn. After Xiao He and Xiao Bai woke up, they recovered very quickly under Bailey Hongzhuang's treatment. However, the white lion and the white dragon were still in a deep sleep. They showed no signs of waking up at all. After Di Beichen arrived in the upper realm, he immediately began to search for Bailey Hongzhuang. However, after asking around, he discovered that not a single cultivator had come to the upper realm before his arrival. This answer made him feel very strange. He had clearly seen Bailey Hongzhuang's hairpin. It could not be fake. However, there was no need for her to lie to him. This made him feel very helpless. Chapter 4179. It turned out that the entrance to the upper realm was random. It seemed that Hong Zhuang had probably arrived at a different city from him. That was why he did not see Hong Zhuang's figure. This made his originally very depressed mood a little better. At least this proved that there was a high chance that Hong Zhuang was fine. He just had to go to a few more cities in the upper realm to find Hong Zhuang. This was nothing to him. As long as he could find Hong Zhuang, it was worth it no matter how much effort he had to put in. After understanding this point, Bewitching began to embark on the journey to find Bailey Hongzhuang. Although the upper realm was very big, and it was not easy to find Bailey Hongzhuang, Bewitching was confident. As Bailey Hongzhuang's injuries gradually healed, she began to be curious about the upper realm. Originally, she had always been curious about whether the Bailey family still existed in the Shengxian continent after 1,000 years. Therefore, she deliberately asked Wang Yanhan. Unfortunately, Wang Yanhan had never heard of the Bailey family, so she could not confirm. Although it was now 1,000 years later, and she had nothing to do with the Bailey family, she only hoped that the Bailey family still existed. As long as she thought of such a place, she would feel a sense of familiarity in her heart. On this day, Bailey Hongzhuang walked out of the inn with interest. The sun shone on her body and gave her a burst of warmth. Her mood, which had been depressed for many days, became sunny at this moment. With a bright smile on her delicate face, Bailey Hongzhuang walked on the streets of Rong'an City. Looking at the extremely lively scene around her, her eyes became brighter and brighter. Master, the upper realm is even more lively than Punglai Island. Xiao Hei's eyes flashed with surprise as she constantly looked around. Rong'an City was obviously a very big city. It was extremely lively, and there was an endless stream of people. However, there were only shops around and no stalls. Most of the shops sold food and treasures that cultivators needed for their cultivation. If it was in the lower realm, there would always be many delicious and fun things. However, there were even more things related to cultivators here. Walking on the road, Bailey Hongzhuang noticed that the passers-by were often armed, and the aura they released was very shocking. It was obvious how powerful these people were. Bailey Hongzhuang sighed inwardly. The cultivators from the upper realm were indeed extraordinary. Her aura could be said to be at the bottom of this group of people, so she felt a lot of pressure. It seems that we really have to keep a low profile in the upper realm. Otherwise, if we accidentally offend someone, it won't be easy to clean up the mess. Bailey Hongzhuang sighed inwardly. Normally, the probability of them getting into trouble was not small. There were enemies everywhere, and she was alone, so she had to be careful. Otherwise, if there was trouble, it would not be easy to deal with it. Master, don't worry. We won't get into trouble, Xiao Hei said. Now she also knew that the environment they were in was not easy. Naturally, she had to be more careful and not get into trouble. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly. I know that you have always been very obedient. Chapter 4180. The sky was clear, and the sun was shining brightly. Diyujue felt that it had been a long time since he had been so happy to return to his family. Although he had yet to reunite with Beichen, he believed that it was only a matter of time before he found Beichen. In the past, every time he returned, he would feel extremely depressed. Since the day Beichen disappeared, not only did he have to endure his own heartache, but he also had to face all kinds of pressure from his family. His parents' resentment towards him was imaginable. Most importantly, his wife was unwilling to see him. He had always loved Lin Yunqing deeply, but he had done something that hurt her the most. He was extremely regretful. Now that he had finally brought back news of their son, he hoped that Yunqing would be happy. When he thought that Yunqing might be happy because of this, the corners of his lips could not help but curl up. Even his brows became bright and sunny. When Di Linxian heard that Diyujue had returned, a trace of joy appeared in his eyes. Then his face darkened again. He still has the nerve to come back. Xiao Wanrong noticed the change in Di Lin Zhao's expression and could not help but roll her eyes. Old man, stop pretending. You're obviously very happy that Yujue is back. How am I very happy? Di Lin Xian raised an eyebrow. I can't wait for him to not come back. After you chased Yujue away the last time, he has been staying outside for a long time and has not come back. I don't care. You're not allowed to do that again. If you chase your son out and never come back, I'll see what you're going to do. Xiao Wanrong could not hide her dissatisfaction. You can't find your grandson. If you chased your son away, I'll see what you're going to do. A loving mother leads to a wastrel son. Di Lin Xian shook his head helplessly. I can't be bothered to talk to you. I don't understand how I gave birth to such an idiot. He even lost his own son. If word gets out, he'll be a joke. Think about me. I've been so powerful for so many years. But in the end, I was laughed at by everyone for what my stupid son did. Most importantly, my precious grandson is missing. How can I not be angry? Then there's no use in scolding him. Xiao Wanrong's expression was full of helplessness. Do you think Yujue will feel good after such a thing happened? You don't have to say it, he's already blaming himself. So many years have passed, and Yujue has been searching all this time. What's the point of scolding him like this? It's all your fault. Di Lin Xian blew his beard and glared, the displeasure on his face still not dissipating. As long as I can't find my precious grandson, he will inevitably be scolded. Why is it all my fault? Xiao Wanrong couldn't help but ask when she saw that Di Lin Xian was talking about her again. Isn't it all because of your stupid son? Oh. Xiao Wanrong's voice suddenly rose. Then according to what you mean, could it be that I can give birth to him alone? I'm too lazy to talk to you. As soon as she finished speaking, Xiao Wanrong directly sat down and turned her face to the other side, clearly unwilling to pay any more attention to Di Lin Xian. After he noticed that Xiao Wanrong was angry, Di Lin Xian couldn't help but say, All right, old woman, aren't I angry? You know my temper. Chapter 4181. Xiao Wanrong and Di Lin Xian had been together for so many years, so she knew his temper very well. He was stubborn on the outside but soft on the inside. No matter what happened, he was unwilling to admit it, but he did not actually think that way. Ever since Di Yujue was chased away by Di Lin Xian, she could tell that he missed Di Yujue very much even though he was unwilling to admit it. Every once in a while, he could not help but ask about Di Yujue. He had always been worried about him. However, every time Di Yujue returned, the old man would inevitably think of this matter again and chase Di Yujue away. It had been like this for the past few years. This time, Di Yujue had returned. When Di Lin Xian heard the news, he had clearly been exceptionally happy. However, when he saw that she was present, his expression immediately changed. She really could not do anything about this old man. It's fine if you bring this up in front of me, but please don't bring it up in front of my daughter-in-law. You clearly know how sad she is because of this. The two of them are not together because of this. If you keep bringing this up, won't you be poking at her heart? Xiao Wanrong sighed. They had been living very well in the past, but ever since this happened, everyone had a knot in their hearts. They only wanted to find their precious grandson. Logically speaking, with the Di family's abilities, it should not be too difficult. It was just a pity that he had gone to the lower world. It would be much more complicated to find him. They had not heard any news about their precious grandson for so many years, so they were actually very upset. Moreover, they all knew about their grandson's constitution. It had been over 20 years. Although they were unwilling to give up, they knew all too well what would happen once the cursed constitution flared up. As a result, they knew that the chances of finding him were just too slim. I understand. Di Lin Xian nodded and sighed. You should talk to Yunqing more when you're free. Yujue is indeed in the wrong, but he can't just ignore Yujue like this. That's true, but you don't understand how a mother feels when she loses her child. Actually, Yunqing has been suffering all these years. Alas, in the end, it's still Yujue's fault. See, wasn't I right? Di Lin Xian shrugged. It's all because of that stupid son of mine. Not only did he ruin my reputation, but he also made everyone suffer. Old man, don't you care about your face? How long has it been since you went out after this incident? How can I go out? Every time they ask me about my grandson's whereabouts, I can't answer. I might as well not go out. You say that Elder Sue. The moment I went out, he kept telling me about his precious grandson's achievements. Isn't he deliberately trying to anger me? If it weren't for the fact that I don't know where my precious grandson ended up, how could he be worse than my grandson? Di Linxian couldn't help but blow his beard and glare. Xiao Wanrong obviously knew about this situation, and couldn't help but sigh. Let's not talk about anything else. When Yujua comes over in a while, don't scold him anymore. Just bear with it. Chapter 4182. Di Linxian remained silent. It wasn't that he wanted to scold Di Yujua on purpose every time, but he really couldn't control his temper every time this matter was brought up. Not long after, Di Yujua walked over. Father, mother. Di Yujua bowed respectfully to the two of them. Xiao Wanrong nodded, and quickly walked in front of Di Yujua. Yujua, looking at you, you've lost a lot of weight. You've been working hard recently, haven't you? Xiao Wanrong's face was full of concern. Although she complained that Di Yujua had lost her precious grandson, she also felt very sorry for her son. For the past 20 years, her son had been running around outside tirelessly, and had not relaxed at all. She also felt sorry for him. While Xiao Wanrong was speaking, Di Linxian could not help but size up Di Yujua. Especially when he found that the latter had indeed lost a lot of weight. He could not help but frown. Deep in his eyes were concern and worry. Mother, I'm fine. Di Yujua shook his head with a faint smile on his face. How have you been recently? We're all fine. Xiao Wanrong smiled faintly. Don't be in a hurry to leave this time. You've been away from home all these years, and it's been very tiring for you. This time, you should rest at home for a while. Di Yujua shook his head. I still have to go out again. Di Linxian had not spoken at first, but when he heard that Xiao Wanrong wanted Di Yujua to stay at home for a while, he heaved a sigh of relief. In fact, it was not his intention to chase his son out. However, when he heard that Di Yujua had actually rejected him, he could not help but feel even angrier. You still have the nerve to come back. Didn't you say that you wouldn't come back if you couldn't find your grandson? Di Linxian asked. Old man. Xiao Wanrong tugged at Di Linxian, her eyes full of resentment. She had just warned this old man, but she did not expect him to say such things in the blink of an eye. It wasn't easy for her son to come back. She wanted to see Di Yujua more. He didn't think that Di Linxian would say something like that. Wasn't he trying to chase him away? If it was any other time, Di Yujua would have remained silent upon hearing Di Linxian's words. However, a smile appeared on his face at this moment. Father, mother, I've finally found Beichen's whereabouts, Di Yujua said with a smile. Following Di Yujua's words, there was a moment of silence in the room. Di Linxian and Xiao Wanrong couldn't help but look at each other. Both of their eyes were filled with astonishment. What did you just say? Di Linxian's expression suddenly changed, and his eyes were filled with nervousness and doubt. Say that again. Xiao Wanrong hurriedly grabbed Di Yujua's hand, looking nervous and anxious. Yujua, did you just say that you found the whereabouts of my grandson? Di Yujua nodded. That's right. Then where is he? Is he outside? As she spoke, Xiao Wanrong could not help but walk out of the room. Even Di Linxian could not help but walk out as well. This news was simply too surprising. After searching for so many years, they had never let go of the obsession in their hearts. However, they also knew that the chances of finding him were getting smaller and smaller. Chapter 4183. Father, mother, he didn't come back with me. Di Yujua hurriedly explained when he saw how anxious his parents were. Hearing this, Di Linxian and Xiao Wanrong finally withdrew their gazes from outside the house, and looked at Di Yujua in confusion. What do you mean? It wasn't easy to find him. Why didn't you bring him back? Some unforeseen events happened. Listen to me slowly. Alright, go ahead. Di Linxian and Xiao Wanrong looked at Di Yujua together, their eyes filled with anticipation. Di Yujua also knew that his parents had always been concerned about Di Beichen's whereabouts. So he immediately told them everything that had happened after he went out this time. You mean to say that you were just one step away from bringing my precious grandson back? Di Linxian raised his eyebrows, his face filled with displeasure. Why can't you be a little faster? I'm really going to be angered to death by you. I've cultivated for so many years for nothing. Old man, why are you blaming Yujue again? He didn't want this to happen either. Xiao Wanrong hurriedly said. No matter what, at least this time, Yujue went out and found Beichen. Although we don't know where Beichen is now, since he's come to the upper realm, there are only a few cities at the entrance. As long as we send people over, we should be able to find him very quickly. Di Yujue nodded. I think so too. I've come back this time to send people to the various cities to find Beichen. Then what are you waiting for? Hurry up and go. Di Linxian was clearly an impatient person. He had waited for so many years and finally found his grandson's whereabouts with great difficulty. He really hated that he couldn't fly over to find Di Beichen. I have to draw a portrait first. That way, it'll be easier for everyone to find him. Then hurry up and draw. Xiao Wanrong and Di Yujue couldn't help but look at each other when they saw Di Linxian's anxious appearance. Their expressions were filled with amusement. In fact, even though Di Linxian often scolded him, Di Yujue had never taken it to heart. He knew his father's personality very well. He was used to it since he was young. Yujue, hurry up and draw. I really want to see what our grandson looks like. Xiao Wanrong's eyes were also filled with interest. Ever since they had seen Di Beichen when he was young, they had not seen Di Beichen again for many years. They did not know what Di Beichen looked like now, so they were very curious. Good. I'll do it right away. Di Yujue nodded. He immediately took out a pen and paper and prepared to draw Di Beichen's portrait. All these years, he had never drunk to his heart's content until he met Di Beichen. He had always treated Di Beichen as a close friend, so he had a deep impression of Di Beichen's appearance. Xiao Wanrong clapped her hands. Her eyes were filled with joy as she hurriedly said, Oh right, should we inform Yunqing now? Yunqing will definitely be very happy when she finds out. Mother, let me tell Yunqing about this matter later, Di Beichen said slowly. All these years, Lin Yunqing had never been willing to forgive him. He had also not gotten along well with Lin Yunqing for a long time. This time, he brought this news back with the hope that he could tell Lin Yunqing properly. He could imagine how happy Lin Yunqing would be after hearing this news. He also hoped that Lin Yunqing would forgive him. Chapter 4184. Di Yujue began to draw Di Beichen's appearance. He knew that the Di Beichen he had met before was in disguise. He knew this when he saw Xiren and Shengguan Yingying. After all, the Xiren and Shengguan Yingying he had met before did not look like this. On the way to find Di Beichen, he had learned a lot about Di Beichen from Xiren and Shengguan Yingying. He also had a certain understanding of Di Beichen's appearance. Fortunately, Xiren had drawn Di Beichen's appearance before. He had already imprinted it deeply in his heart. At this moment, he had to draw a few more portraits, so that it would be easier for his subordinates to find him. As Di Yujue drew stroke by stroke, Di Beichen's appearance slowly appeared. Di Linxian and Xiao Wanrong had been standing by the side, only wanting to see how their precious grandson looked like. At this moment, when they saw the outline of Di Yujue's face, the joy in their eyes grew stronger. Yes, this appearance. He's really handsome. Xiao Wanrong's face was filled with a wide smile. It seems that Beichen has inherited your and Yunqing's good points. He's much better looking than any of the juniors I've seen all these years. When Di Linxian noticed the handsome young man in the portrait, the smile in his eyes widened. He could not help but say, Isn't this all because he has inherited my good points? Back then, I was very famous in the upper realm. Many girls liked me. Old man, stop bragging. Xiao Wanrong glanced at Di Linxian. Why don't you take a look at yourself now? What's wrong with me now? Di Linxian was very dissatisfied. Look at Yujue. Isn't it because of me? When Di Yujue heard Di Linxian's narcissistic words, he couldn't help but raise his head, and a smile appeared on his face. Ever since Beichen had disappeared, he had not seen Di Linxian so happy for a long time. Fortunately, he had brought back news of Di Beichen this time. When Di Baichen reunited with them, he could imagine how happy Di Linxian and the others would be. Because of his mistake, his family had been depressed and sad for so many years. He only hoped that he could find Di Baichen as soon as possible, so that they could be reunited. That was clearly because of me. Fortunately, you pestered me to marry you back then. Otherwise, I really don't know what your child looks like now. Xiao Wanrong rolled her eyes at Di Linxian, but a deep smile appeared on her face. You were the one who begged me to marry you, didn't you? Xiao Wanrong glared and said, Yujua, you be the judge. Father, mother, I wasn't even born at that time. I can't say for sure. Di Yujua shrugged. His deep eyes were as bright as the stars. They had not bickered like this for a very long time. He really missed it when he saw it again. Xiao Wanrong and Di Linxian glared at each other when they heard that. Clearly, they were certain that the other party was the one who had pursued them. That's right. Father, mother, I have something important to tell you. Di Yujua suddenly said. What is it? Di Linxian and Xiao Wanrong stopped joking. Instead, they were very serious. Now, as long as it was related to Di Baichen, it was absolutely important to them. Chapter 4185. Baichen is already married, and his wife is also very outstanding. Following Di Yujua's words, Di Linxian and Xiao Wanrong could not help but stare blankly. A thick sense of astonishment surfaced on their faces. He's already married? Di Yujua nodded slightly. As you know, Baichen has a cursed body, and his legs were originally crippled. Fortunately, he met Bailey Hongzhuang who helped him change his physique and allowed him to grow until now. Otherwise, with the tyranny of the cursed body and the medical skills of the lower realm, I'm afraid that we really wouldn't be able to find him. Is our granddaughter-in-law's name Bailey Hongzhuang? Xiao Wanrong's eyes lit up. I didn't expect our grandson to be so fast. He didn't even need our help to arrange it, and has already helped us to marry our granddaughter-in-law. This is great news. That's right, her name is Bailey Hongzhuang. Di Yujua smiled faintly. I've seen them before, but they had disguised themselves at that time, so I didn't recognize them. According to the situation that I understood at that time, the husband and wife have a very good relationship. They had previously gone to the Prunglai Palace to help Baichen find the medicine to treat his illness. This Miss Bailey is wholeheartedly devoted to Baichen. As a father, Di Yujua only wished for his son to be happy. Furthermore, he had not been able to take care of Di Baichen all these years. He did not know how to make up for the guilt in his heart. Now that Baichen was so sincere to his wife, he naturally hoped that everyone in the family would agree. However, according to his judgment, Di Linxian and Xiao Wanrong did not seem like people who would object. As expected, I didn't expect this granddaughter-in-law to be so amazing. In this case, Baichen's survival is entirely thanks to granddaughter-in-law. Xiao Wanrong immediately understood, and couldn't help but clap her hands. Our grandson is really lucky. He happened to find a wife with such brilliant medical skills. This is simply our family's fortune. Looking at Xiao Wanrong's appearance, Di Yujua smiled and nodded. Yes, it's all thanks to Miss Bailey. Old man, why aren't you saying anything? Cough cough. Di Linxian coughed lightly and said, How long have they been married? Is there any news about my great-grandson? Di Yujua and Xiao Wanrong couldn't help but be stunned when they heard that. When they realized what Di Linxian had said, they couldn't help but laugh. Old man, you're thinking too far ahead. Di Linxuan's face stiffened. What do you mean by far? Wouldn't it be much faster if they got married? How long has it been since we had a baby? Father, this matter will have to wait until we find Baichen and Hongzhuang before you ask them. Di Yujua spoke up. Di Linxian nodded. Then why aren't you drawing quickly? Yujua, how has Baichen been all these years? Has he suffered? Baichen's luck is pretty good. He was picked up by the sect master of the Tiangang sect in the lower realm. He raised him as his own grandson, and later handed the entire Tiangang sect to Baichen. Di Yujua's expression softened. This was something he was extremely grateful for. If Baichen had suffered a lot all these years, then he really didn't know how to face it. Fortunately, the heavens pitied Baichen and allowed him to meet Situ Yen. All these years, he had been living very well, and Situ Yen had raised him very well. Chapter 4186. When the time comes, we have to thank them properly. Di Linshuan's expression was serious. After so many years, we owe them a lot. They even let Beichen become the sect leader. They really treat us with sincerity. If they were not sure whether they really took care of Di Beichen before, then from the fact that they were willing to hand over the position of sect leader to Di Beichen, they could tell that they really treated Di Beichen as their grandson. Otherwise, he would not have handed over his sect to Di Beichen. Di Yujua nodded slightly. I've already expressed my gratitude to them. Tiangang's sect is also a very powerful sect in the lower realm, so we don't have to worry about Beichen being taken advantage of in the past. With such an identity, I'm sure he's living well in the past. Not only that, sect leader Situ is Hong Zhuang's grandfather. Speaking of which, their marriage is really a coincidence. No wonder. Xia Wanrong suddenly understood. In that case, our granddaughter-in-law's family has done us a great favor. We must treat our granddaughter-in-law well in the future, and not let Beichen bully our granddaughter-in-law. That's a must. Di Linshuan's voice was loud and clear. Our Di family always knows how to repay kindness. With such a great favor, Beichen must treat her well for the rest of his life. Don't worry, their relationship is very good. According to the situation I understand, Beichen will not treat Hong Zhuang badly. The great-grandson you want should not be too far away. Di Yujua's face was filled with a joyful smile. Although they did not participate in Di Beichen's marriage, they were very happy to know that the husband and wife were harmonious and happy. After Di Yujua drew a few portraits, he kept one and kept it in his Qingquan bag. After instructing people to look for Di Beichen in all the major cities, he went to his residence. Although it was his residence, he had not been here for a long time. When he thought of his wife, Di Yujua felt extremely helpless. Ever since Di Beichen disappeared, Lin Yunqing had been unwilling to talk to him. Every time she saw him, she couldn't help but cry. Actually, he knew that Yunqing had deep feelings for him. When she was pregnant, Yunqing had been looking forward to seeing Beichen. Ever since she found out that Beichen possessed the cursed physique, Yunqing had paid special attention to Beichen. Later on, Beichen had disappeared, so it was easy to imagine how great of a blow it was to her. Usually, when he did not appear, Yunqing would often think of this matter. Once he appeared, it would undoubtedly remind her of this matter. As time passed, he didn't dare rashly appear before Yunqing, so as to avoid hurting her feelings. However, this time, he could finally bring good news to Yunqing. When he thought about how happy Yunqing might look, he felt a burst of joy in his heart. Inside the room, a woman in plain robes was seated on the bed as she looked out the window. The woman was extremely beautiful, like a lotus flower that had just emerged from the water. Her skin was delicate, while her facial features were peerlessly exquisite. Anyone who laid eyes on her would believe that she was a peerless beauty. However, the space between the woman's brows was filled with worry while her eyes were filled with sorrow. At this moment, her expression was rather complicated as she stared out the window. She had heard that Di Yujua had returned. When she had first heard the news, she had been overjoyed. However, not long after, her happiness had turned into complicated feelings. Chapter 4187. Madam, now that the young master has returned, you shouldn't treat him so coldly anymore. It hasn't been easy for the young master all these years. In order to make you happy, he's tried everything. Besides, he hasn't returned for a very long time. If you continue to push the young master away, that won't do. The maidservant next to her noticed the complicated look on Lin Yunqing's face, and could not help but voice her thoughts. She had been by Lin Yunqing's side since she was a child. Even though she was a maidservant, the two of them got along more like sisters. She knew very well that with Di Yujua's status, there were countless women who yearned for him. The madam may be a peerless beauty, but there were many other beauties in the upper realm as well. If the young master's feelings for the madam had not run so deep that he would not accept anyone else's feelings, the madam would not know what kind of situation she would be in. All these years, she had watched the madam push the young master away again and again. She could not help but worry. Lin Yunqing was silent. Her gaze was distant and complicated, making it impossible for anyone to see through her thoughts. Seeing this, the maidservant continued. Madam, actually, the young master was very upset about what had happened back then. This was definitely not what he wanted to see. Why are you doing this? The corners of Lin Yunqing's eyes were moist. How could she not be aware of all this? However, when she thought about how her infant child had wandered off to an unknown place, she could not help but feel her heart ache. Only a mother would be able to understand this. She understood Du Jue's sincerity towards her, and understood that Du Jue's pain in his heart was no less than hers. However, after this incident, it was as if an irreparable crack had appeared between the two of them. As long as one looked at each other, one would be able to think of the most painful thing in one's heart. Every time she opened the wound, it would be filled with blood. This time, Du Jue had been away for so long and she was afraid. She was afraid that her actions over the years had hurt Du Jue so much that he would no longer want to pay attention to her. Now that Du Jue had clearly returned for a while, but he had not come to see her, she felt a little upset. So what if he's here? Lin Yunqing asked herself. Could it be that she could completely forget about this matter and never mention it again? She couldn't. She knew this all too well. Just as Lin Yunqing was pondering, Du Jue's figure slowly appeared in her line of sight. He was still as elegant and handsome as ever. Just a glance from him was enough to make people blush and fluster. When the maidservant saw that Du Jue had arrived, her face was filled with joy. Madam, please don't drive young lord away this time. After whispering these words, the servant girl opened the door and welcomed Du Jue in. Then she tactfully left. Yunqing. Du Jue called out softly, his deep eyes filled with tenderness and love. Even though Lin Yunqing had always been unwilling to talk to him, his feelings for her had never faded. You're back, Lin Yunqing said slowly. Du Jue nodded slightly. I've been away for quite some time this time. You must be tired after being out for so many days. Let me pour you a cup of tea. Chapter 4188. When Du Jue suddenly grabbed her hand, Lin Yunqing couldn't help but be stunned. She instinctively wanted to struggle free, but she soon relaxed. The maidservant was right. She could not continue on like this. At the end of the day, if Du Jue had not doted on her so much, her situation in the D family would have changed. Most importantly, she loved Du Jue. Du Jue had naturally noticed Lin Yunqing's reaction, but he did not take it to heart. The doting look in his eyes was still as strong as ever. Yunqing, I've been gone for so long this time, and I finally found our son's whereabouts. Lin Yunqing couldn't help but be stunned when she heard this. The teacup that she had just received immediately fell to the ground and shattered into pieces. The tea splashed onto her skirt, but she didn't seem to notice at all. She just stared fixedly at Du Jue. You? What did you just say? I said that I found our son's whereabouts. I've already sent people to search for him. I believe that it won't be long before we find him. When that time comes, our family will be reunited. Lin Yunqing covered her mouth with her hand. She could barely control her emotions and wanted to cry out in alarm. However, her eyes gradually moistened and hot tears rolled down her cheeks. Are you telling the truth? Have you really found our son? Du Jue nodded affirmatively. You didn't hear wrong. Everything I said is true. Tears flowed uncontrollably from the corners of her eyes. Lin Yunqing burst into tears in an instant, unable to control her emotions at all. It had been over 20 years. Ever since her child had gone missing, she had never been truly happy for a single day. As long as she thought that her child might have died or suffered all kinds of pain, her heart would ache to the extreme. However, now that Du Jue had finally found her child's whereabouts, she was so excited and happy that she could not stop sobbing. Du Jue could not help but pull her into his arms when he saw Lin Yunqing's surprised yet fragile look. He gently wiped away her tears. Yunqing, don't cry. It wasn't easy for us to find Beichen. You should be happy. Lin Yunqing nodded. Yes, I should be happy. I should be happy. Even so, Lin Yunqing couldn't help but shed tears. The greater the pain, the greater the surprise. You said his name is Bewitching? That's right. His name is now Bewitching. Then is he doing well now? Lin Yunqing's voice trembled slightly, and her expression was filled with hesitation and nervousness. After so many years, when she thought of the cursed body, she was almost certain that Bewitching was not still alive. However, Yujua telling her all this now proved that Bewitching was still alive. He's doing very well. He hasn't suffered as much as we thought. He's a blessed child. Yujua knew that Lin Yunqing was most worried about whether Bewitching had been doing well all these years, so he immediately told her the situation. After hearing everything, Lin Yunqing heaved a sigh of relief. That's great. He's indeed a blessed child. He's still doing very well without us by his side. Yujua, tell me quickly. How did you find him? Why didn't you come back with him? Hurry up and tell me everything. I want to know everything about him. Chapter 4189. Lin Yunqing had never participated in Bewitching's life over the years. Although she had missed it, she also wanted to understand what had happened to Bewitching during the years she had missed. At least, this could make up for some of her regrets. Okay, I'll tell you everything I know. Yujua's face was filled with a faint smile. He could understand Lin Yunqing's emotions. In fact, when he knew that Bewitching was his biological son, he also wanted to understand all of Bewitching's past experiences. Therefore, whether it was in Tiangang sect, or when he was traveling with Wenziren, he was learning about Debei City. This was undoubtedly extremely precious to him as a father. He could no longer participate in his past life. At least, he wanted to understand so that when he met Bewitching in the future, he would not be so unfamiliar with him. After Yujua told Lin Yunqing all the things that happened after he left this time, Lin Yunqing's face gradually recovered. The worry between her eyebrows quietly faded, and was replaced by a trace of joy and expectation. Then Bewitching and Hong Zhuang have now come to the upper realm. Will they be in danger? Lin Yunqing's eyes were filled with concern. The upper realm was not like the lower realm. The cultivators here were extremely powerful. Bewitching and Hong Zhuang had obviously just obtained the authority to come here. If they got into trouble, they might lose their lives if they were not careful. Usually, the cultivators who just came to the lower realm were the easiest to pay with their lives. She did not want this to happen to Bewitching and Hong Zhuang. That was something she could not bear. You don't have to worry too much. Based on my understanding of them, their strength is also very outstanding. What's more, Bewitching has obtained the inheritance of the dark force this time. His strength should have improved greatly. I believe that there shouldn't be any problem with the two of them being together. The people we've sent out will find them as soon as possible. Yujua was obviously full of confidence in Bewitching. In fact, since the first time he saw Bewitching, he felt that he was a very outstanding young man. Back then, Bewitching and the others had just arrived at Penglai Island not long ago. Yet they were able to gain a foothold in such a short period of time, and become the most sought-after newcomers. From this, one could see how capable they were. Although the upper realm was filled with trials, he still believed that with their abilities, they would be able to solve them. Seeing that Yujua was so confident, Lin Yunqing's expression also relaxed a little. She knew that Yujua's vision had always been very accurate. Since he said so, it proved that Bewitching and the others did indeed have the ability to deal with it. That's good. Why don't we go find them together? Lin Yunqing could not help but stand up. Her eyes were filled with anxiety. She could not wait to reach the city immediately and look for Bewitching and Hong Zhuang. Wait, Yujua said. Without waiting for Yujua to finish speaking, Lin Yunqing could not help but frown. Her expression was filled with pleading. Yujua, I really can't stay here. After so many years, I haven't heard the slightest bit of news about him. Now that I finally know that he has come to the upper realm to see you, how can I stay here and wait? I must go find him. Even if it's just a second earlier, it's still good. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.